Rick, can you tell us what happened here this weekend that was so significant?
Well, this weekend we had the first ever Sideshow Gathering. We also had the first ever Sword Swallowing Convention, and it was the first meeting of the Sword Swallowers Association International, which is a new organization this year dedicated to networking existing sword swallowers and promoting the art of sword swallowing worldwide. And we also set several world records. We set one and then broke it immediately thereafter by swallowing 50 swords by a group of 19 sword swallowers at the same time.
What happened with how did everybody how did it come about? How did the organization come together?
The organization came about. Dan Meyer and myself were researching sword swallowing, and we're studying sword swallowing ourselves. We're interested in performing the act of sword swallowing and meeting new sword swallowers. And it was primarily through our research and learning how to do it ourselves that we ended up meeting other sword swallowers, and we developed an interest in learning more about the history and who's currently performing it and techniques that they use for our personal use. And it quickly expanded into a network of sword swallowers, which never existed in the past. And this year we launched the official organization because our network had grown. We started several mailing lists that the sword swallowers could discuss issues related to the industry on. And here we are today holding our first meeting and convention.
How does somebody get to be a member?
You have to be an existing sword swallower. We don't promote new sword swallowers. We don't try to encourage other people to try it. It is a very dangerous act, very dangerous routine. But for those existing sword swallowers, we like to get their photographs, their biographical information, and proof that they have swallowed swords and that they actively perform it. And then they can become a member of the organization by filling out our application.
So this was kind of a groundbreaking weekend.
Very much so, very much so.
Who are some of the great sword swallowers in history?
Oh, Alex Linton, Johnny Mia, the list goes on and on. Red Stewart and the other Red was here, both here this weekend. They are both great sword swallowing.
Okay. Is there anything we should ask Dan differently, or anything we should talk to Dan about? You know, I have some. Yeah. I'll put a different spin on it.
Yeah.
Before, now we're going to make something a little more difficult. This is one I don't do very often, although I did do it.
The Sword Swallowing organization, this is something brand new. How did that come about?
As I was learning sword swallowing, I found there were no books, no real solid resources on how to learn how to swallow a sword. So I contacted each of the living sword swallowers that I could find. Zamora the Torture King and George the Giant had told me there were only a handful of living performing sword swallowers left in the world, and that intrigued me, and I decided to hunt them down and find out exactly how many there were and see what tips I could get from each of them. So I did. I contacted them. I scoured the internet. I think I found a total of about 75 or so living sword swallowers still alive today, many of them who are retired either due to injuries or just age, and probably another 50 or 75 older sword swallowers from the 1800s up until the past few decades. So I contacted all of them, networked them all together, put them all on one web page, developed an online discussion list, and actually split that into two different lists where we've got 60 members on each list, and just networked them all together. And there have been a few problems, a few hassles with that, because sword swallowers by nature get up on stage to swallow a sword for the attention. It's something that they can do that nobody else can do. So sword swallowers tend to have a bit of an ego, and they're used to being the number one guy in their market. They're the only person that can do this type of thing. So when you get two or three sword swallowers together, there tends to be some potential for ego clash. In bringing them together this weekend, my intention wasn't to create conflict or competition, but that we could network together, that we could all learn from each other different tips or tricks on how do you clean your swords, what kind of oil do you use, how do you file your swords, how do you carry your swords, what kind of techniques, patter, that type of thing. It's worked wonderfully.
And can you talk about like the membership and also to explain the dangers of sword swallowing and how it's a very serious art?
Okay. Membership, we have I don't even know what the exact numbers are as of today, but at least half of the world's sword swallowers network together. In order to be a member, you have to provide a photo of yourself swallowing a sword as verification that yes, you are a sword swallower. We don't allow in non-sword swallowers or just kids that think it's cool and something they want to try. You have to be an established sword swallower. The purpose of the organization, this is an organization set up by sword swallowers for sword swallowers, and not to create new baby sword swallowers, newbie sword swallowers, but instead just to establish those who are already established sword swallowers and network them together. In order to be a sword swallower, you have to either be recommended by another sword swallower or send us a photo of you swallowing a sword or your website.
Is there health insurance plan?
No, there isn't. We don't have any of that put in place at this time. We do have waivers that we've made everybody sign that do not hold us, that hold harmless agreements.
What about the dangers of it? I mean, is it something that's really, how does somebody become a sword swallower?
It took me up to 3 years before I got my first sword down, just to get to the first level of getting past the gag reflex and finding the right placement and getting the sword down. And that was constant practice. Some people learn it quicker than that. It just takes a lot of practice in getting the sword down.
In 1967, I was training construction on rope, which nobody had ever done at that time, up to that time, which was in 67. Of course, I don't do the one no more because of the calcification. The implement is over the American Gun Museum, and that is a car accident. But this here is the one implement that I am still capable of doing, and not many sword swallowers are capable. Although there is quite a few that can.
There are several different stages in learning sword swallowing. Without going into details, there's the gag reflex, learning to suppress the gag reflex. Secondly is finding the right placement, getting used to putting it down the esophagus, opening the esophageal sphincter a little bit lower in the stomach, and then getting it down into the stomach, and overcoming the retch reflex that the stomach has. So there's several things to think about, but besides that, then there's the whole thing of putting together the entertainment value, the patter, the technique, the timing of actually being on stage. The actual art of dropping a sword down your throat, just the act of putting a sword down your throat only takes a few seconds, but it takes a lifetime to develop the experience and the patter to actually make it entertaining for someone. The dangers of sword swallowing, yes, it's very dangerous. Some of our members have had extreme accidents. One of our members sliced herself open several months ago, and nearly died. Fortunately, she was with us and managed to set the world record with us the other day. It is extremely dangerous. It's not something that just anybody should try. I've been a fire eater for 25 years, and a juggler and circus clown, stilt walker, raise exotic animals, and sword swallowing was the creme de la creme for me. It was the cream of the crop. When I was 20 years old, I made a list of all the things that I wanted to do in my lifetime, and one of the top of those was to become a sword swallower. And I'm not only a sword swallower, now I'm the president of the organization.